Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics, in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. So for the evening, we'll be recording. If you have any questions or comments for myself, for Adam, please feel free to type those into the chat box. I think I can figure out how to get those on the phone. Otherwise, you can unmute when we get sort of towards the end of this thing to wrap up and pose any relevant questions to Adam or myself as we get there. We are recording for the purposes of saving the world one conversation at a time, and for going back in time, should you so wish, or should I so wish, to review the information that we talked about and revise what it is that we do on a regular basis. So this is Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable. This is officially session 18. Very special guest this evening. Adam is in the room, so I'll do the formal thing and then give you the informal rundown, and then have him say hello, and we'll jump in. Let me just get this to speaker screen. I think I can do that on here somehow. And all right, well, let's go. Adam Douglas is our guest tonight. He is the manager of sport performance for Hockey Canada men's national teams and the lead strength and conditioning coach with women's high performance. He has been a member of teams that won gold at the 2015, 2018, and 2020 World Juniors, Sochi 2014 Olympic Games, and the 2012 Women's World Championship. In this role, Adam oversees all elements of the strength and conditioning program for Hockey Canada's high performance programming. Adam is also an applied sports scientist with Catapult Sports. He works with their hockey clients to ensure they're maximizing the usage of wearable technology, as well as driving research and innovation. Adam has completed his PhD at York University and is a certified strength and conditioning coach through the NSCA. I mean, that's a shortened version of a pretty dominant resume in the hockey world and in the strength and conditioning world, and in Canada, if not globally. Really happy to have Adam on this evening. And before he says hello, our obvious connection was York University, and we stayed in touch ever since he left and then I left, and we've stayed connected. And what a career this guy's had. He's going to run out of fingers pretty soon, I think, for rings and a neck. I don't know. He's going to get too heavy with the gold medals hanging around it. I've been a part of a lot of good things, and beyond hockey and professionalism, you know, he's a family guy, and really giving with his time for athletes and therapists alike. So this is why I wanted to have Adam on. You know, I've been lucky enough to call Adam a colleague for a number of years, a friend for a number of years, and certainly a mentor, and really respect and appreciate all the work that you've done, Adam. And I don't know, I think we'll probably get into some stories that we shared, or clients or athletes that we shared discussions without naming too many names or situations, but I'll let you say hello, and really appreciate you taking the time to be here this evening. And you get the hockey background working, and it's looking good, man.
This is my office now. Now that I work from home, ever since I left York, this is my home office. So it's the first time I've ever been able to decorate a room in the house that my wife has let me. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I see lots of old familiar faces and some names popping up. So that's certainly great. I hope everyone's doing well. Ever since I've last seen some of you about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, man. Definitely a large York contingent has been out for these chats, and everybody might be battling a little bit of a James hangover from last night. We had, like I mentioned it to you, we had a coast-to-coast call for ATs, but this is a huge one in terms of opening June, tomorrow, which is National Athletic Therapy Month for the CATA. So your conversation tonight goes a long way in sort of highlighting some of the dynamics that I really feel are super important for athletic therapists, and to blend that model into strength and conditioning and performance, and to sort of blur the lines as to where one starts and the other one ends, and so to speak. So, your insight is going to be vastly appreciated, I think, across the board, and definitely every conversation I get to have with you is appreciated. So, crazy times right now. You mentioned you're working from home, so not too much changes in that world, but are you watching Tiger King, or have you started watching Tiger King yet?
Man, that was like 10 weeks ago. We've now moved on, I got to find some note. I was talking to my wife earlier today, and I think I'm just getting like a little TV hangover, like bored of TV. Like there's only so much you can watch. Our kids go to bed around 7:30, so you have a significant adult portion of the evening, but like we bought a fire pit so we can go sit out there, but certainly I'm watching way less TV than I would have thought I was at the beginning. But also if someone's like, hey, you're home all day, what's there to do? Watch TV. And you're like, you get over that pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, you just broke the virtual, well, I guess it's a reality now. You just broke the tie that was, I think it was 13-13. We had 9 guests on last night, and it was a 6-3 that really shifted the numbers. So there's an ongoing tally. So I think you just pushed the yeses into the lead again as we move forward. So there is a large number of people that hang up after hearing the result of the Tiger King question. The rest
That's all
of
for.
These are the most important things, but bizarre times, man. And on so many levels have affected so many people. Maybe let's jump into what things have been for you. So how about a little bit of a rundown? We'll go where you're at right now, and then we'll work our way sort of chronologically in reverse, I guess, to our time that we worked together, and all the stuff that you're continually doing with Hockey Canada. But how has it been from home with Catapult? Or maybe just start with your role with Catapult and what you're doing now.
So my role with Catapult, it's kind of twofold. So first and foremost, my job is to make sure our hockey clients are understanding and maximizing the value of their data. And that's one of the reasons why I joined Catapult. So they kind of approached me when I was still at York because of my PhD work that I was doing, but also Hockey Canada had been a client for 5 years now, 3 years at that time. And so I had been their primary contact with that. So I'd really gotten to know a lot of the people on the inside. And one of the things I really appreciated as a client was the constant interaction with people at the company. You have some tech companies, and I've been a victim of it too, where you basically buy it or they give you the sales pitch, and then as soon as they have your money, you won't see them again for another 3 years when your contract's up. Or it's so hard to get hold of guys if you have questions or if something breaks. And as a client, I really appreciated with Catapult, somebody was a phone call or a text away, and I like that model. So now my role is to be that person for our hockey clients. They've really streamlined. So we have 31 or 31 clients, ice hockey clients in North America, 13 NHL teams, and the rest are either American Hockey League teams or NCAA teams. And so my job is essentially to help them. That's the biggest thing that I do. So I spend a lot of time talking to whether it's the strength coach or the therapist at the respective clubs, helping them understand their information, figuring out ways they can do it. But the other part of my job is I have this like research and innovation tag. And really that just means what else can we learn from the information that they're wearing. And Hockey Canada is still a client, and I still work with Hockey Canada. So I use a lot of our data and our game data and our practice data to figure out if our clients can ask better questions or just dig deeper into what wearable technology can tell us about the sport of ice hockey. And really, that's kind of why I started, my PhD work in the first place, is because there's nothing out there. You can look at, if you're fortunate to be working with a team that has technology or GPS trackers or whatever, any other sport, you can find peer-reviewed literature, you can find positional norms, game day norms, practice norms, match day minus 1, 2, 3, whatever. In almost any other outdoor sport, but there was nothing about that for hockey. So, you know, I kind of build that area with my schoolwork, but also I still do a lot of that now because there's just so much we don't know compared to other sports. So a lot of my day right now is like Zoom calls, client calls, breaking down data, trying to see trends, patterns, stuff like that. It's funny, I was talking to somebody earlier today and, you know, they were asking me how it was going. And I said, I'm actually busier now because there's no games or practices. So if you're a team that, you know, is a client of mine, most of your day is at practice or games or stuff. You don't really have the opportunity to take this collective breath. And so now people are taking this collective breath and they're like, hey, like, you know, I want to ask these questions or I want to learn more. So I'm averaging probably 4 or 5 Zoom calls a day, which is great. You know, it breaks up the day a lot. You know, people talk about Zoom fatigue. I don't think I'm quite there yet. Maybe by the end of Fridays, I start to get there a little. But I like it because I love talking and sharing knowledge and learning from the clients just as much as I try to teach them. With Hockey Canada, things have changed greatly. They just announced last week that they've canceled all of our summer camps. So Women's World Championships at the beginning of April first got canceled, then our under 18 men's got canceled mid to late April, men's worlds in May, and then they've just wiped out all of our summer training camps, which is huge, right? So we're flipping to virtual for there and trying to figure out how can we deliver some of the information that our athletes need. You know, I have strength coaches that work with our inside our under 18, our development, and our senior team. You know, they're holding weekly calls with their collective training group, just providing education and you know, little mini seminars on what's important at this time, what's important for athletes like that. We're losing from that touch point we would have spending 4 or 5 days twice this summer with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many angles, so many things you touched on that we could jump into, and I'll try to break it down so that I can remember them all. But what a cool job that you found, or that found you through these streams, and really based in passion and drive and all the things that you've done along the way to get to where you're at, and really lined up nicely. I'd imagine that, and you can obviously tell me if I'm wrong, but there was probably no premonition of this at the start of your career, that this is where you would be at in terms of technology or advancement or things like that. Like it's a little bit of a man. It's actually surprising that hockey had nothing, but amazing that you sort of with your background and your knowledge have been able to tie in your PhD and all your work, because your PhD was using well, your master's as well was using Catapult technology, right? So that's kind of where the relationship started.
Yeah. So that's where, like, once Hockey Canada decided we were going to do it, so coming out of the Sochi Olympics, we knew we had to be better at tracking our women's athletes remotely. And for me, going through our centralized process and that whole thing and just being in hockey rinks, I knew there had to be some sort of foundational shift in the way hockey players practice and prepare. It just wasn't matching the demands of the game. You know, hockey coaches typically rely on volume or duration of practice more so to make an impact on their team. And for me, that didn't sit well, because then we ask our players to be as explosive and fast as they can in a game, but we're having them practice 2 hours every day. Like, that's, you're training totally different. And so the problem being in sport is, you know, essentially the head coach is always right. Like, that's very autocratic, especially here in North America. So it's my word against them. You know, we've tried doing heart rate, but, you know, technology at the time, you're reporting practice averages, and it just wasn't great. But this whole point of objective load monitoring, putting a unit on a player, there's no coach bias, there's no support staff bias, there's no researcher bias, there's no athlete bias, there's no perception to it. It's how much work did the athlete do measured by this unit. And if you have something that's valid and reliable in sport to measure mechanical load, why don't we investigate it? So, back in 2014, 2015, hockey, we kind of pitched this idea, and they were all for it. And it's a, significant financial investment that they undertook. And they basically said, okay, Adam, this is your baby, kind of run with it. And, I loved it. Like I dove right into that load monitoring research. And initially everything was about injury. And, this is quite the group to talk about this on, but I'm really a firm believer in that, trying to modify training loads for injury in elite sport is very difficult, because injury mechanism itself is so multifactorial and variable that you can't do a great job at predicting injury from load monitoring. There's the whole acute chronic and that sort of thing. From a mathematical perspective, it just doesn't stand up. And so I started to move away a little bit from the injury side of load monitoring, which was exploding in research at the time, and really wanted to look at performance. Because at the end of the day, in my role and the sport organizations I work with, winning matters. And especially Hockey Canada, it's been ingrained in me since I first started with them back in 2008, in that it's gold or bust. Like, there's nothing else that matters. When we go into a tournament, the expectation is we're going to win. So for me, it's what can I do to help our team win? Whether that's informing coaches of a daily practice, making sure our athletes, we're measuring and monitoring game demands so we can then prepare our athletes for that, whether it's off the ice, or what can we measure from an asymmetry perspective within their skating to then turn back to our medical staff to say, here's some possible interventions, but we can impact their sport and where they are, and it's measurable, and we can monitor it over time. So that's kind of the long-winded version of how we got there. And then, I remember I did my master's with Alison McPherson at York. I actually looked at testing data and seeing if testing data could predict if an athlete was going to get selected for the national team. And after I finished my master's, she was like, okay, great. Like, do you want to start a PhD? And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm done. Like, master's is good. Thank you very much. That was a great 4 years because I was doing it part-time. I really appreciate it. And then all of a sudden with Catapult and Hockey Canada, I now had this whole treasure trove of information in this data set. And when I'm going to look at research papers or trying to find ideas, because it's so much of it's in my head at this point, there's nothing out there with hockey. And hockey itself is, a violent sport, fixed ice surface, fast, energy system demands are unique. The skating stride is unique. It was very hard for me to say, oh, this paper in rugby and the concepts they're doing, well, let's just try it here in hockey. And there was a little bit of trial and error, but it didn't sit right. So then after about, it would have been like 2015, after a few months, I went to Alison. I said, remember when you planted that seed about doing that PhD? Well, how about this project? And, she was great about it. She said, well, that's not really like in my wheelhouse, but if we can surround your committee with, experts in a little bit of the areas as it informs elite sport, then she'll take it on. So, we added Joe Baker from an elite sport expertise perspective, Ronnie Jamnik from a physiology, done a lot of work in hockey and prediction, Michael Rotundi from a statistical analysis, and then Alison from just an epidemiology, population study, design. And so the collective group, we decided to take on this project. So 4.5 years later, we had some really great things to publish because there's nothing out there about hockey. So that's kind of how it started. And I remember when I defended in November this year, we were walking out and I said to Alison, and Katie Robinson was there too. And I said, if you had told undergrad Adam back when he graduated in 2005, he was going to get a PhD at some point, he would have laughed in your face. And I said, even if you had told Masters Adam back in 2014, if he was going to get a PhD at the end of this, he would have laughed in your face. And so you just never know where it's going or coming from or coming to. But I'm fortunate to be able to now check off like the technology box on the pathway of profession.
Yeah, and done so much more than just checking off a box. And again, like every time I hear you speak and the depth and everything that you've done, so many angles we could take this conversation. But for everybody listening who is a non-academic, myself included, Adam had started his master's. We started talking about it while I was at York, and I started looking at some things that were being done and not being done in terms of tracking and statistical analysis. And I had some interaction and I ended up following in Adam's footsteps, starting my master's while I was at York. It also took me 4 years. So how many years in between your master's and your PhD? A couple, right?
Well, months.
Yeah.
Months. Like I want to say, I finished my master's in May of 2015, and I started my PhD in September.
All right. So I won't. Yeah. I won't imitate you there, but the academic side is when it's driven by something that you are so deeply passionate about and ingrained in, it makes it that much more tolerable, I guess, because there are elements of it that were definitely tedious in terms of a master's for me, and just like doing it part-time as you're working full-time and trying to do all those other things. But you pulled in so many elements that are going to make such a huge difference into the future. And you talked about something that we've talked about a little bit on here with past guests as well. And that's sort of like where the coach is always right, and that volume drives progress, or volume drives success. And I've really taken a step back and looked hard at sort of amateur sport and done a lot of reading in amateur sport and trying to address, where can athletic therapy fit in? Where can strength and conditioning, where can this model of performance adjust in the amateur world? Because we all know as we read and do more work at the higher levels that actually less is more, right? It's about quality over quantity. But any advice on sort of like therapists that are out there having that discussion without pointing fingers and trying to tell coaches like you're doing it all wrong here? Not that they're doing it all wrong, but any advice that you would have to sort of at least start the dialogue from an AT, S&C, whatever the background is.
We call it support staff. So for me, with my role with Hockey Canada, so I spend a lot of time now. I spend more time on the men's side than I do the women's side. And so I work really closely with our under 20 program. That's the World Junior team. But so I've done the last 6 years with the World Juniors. So I'm kind of a constant every year. There's very few people that are there year after year. I'm basically one of the only ones now. But that means I deal with a different coaching staff every year. On our women's side, we need to communicate the philosophy and the I don't want to say the way things should be done, but just the lessons we've learned from past years, plus our knowledge and expertise within our knowledge domain. So for me, a lot of what I try to do for coaches is say, listen, this is the overarching philosophy we like to follow, because I am the physical performance pillar within Hockey Canada. I can talk about the verbal or the proverbial we, because that's who I'm representing there. But the thing I've learned, and this is what I want to get through. The thing I've learned is I can talk and present and show research and stand up there with a PhD and tell them that this is how we do things. But at the end of the day, the head coach has control. So I always say to any coaching staff, listen, this is how I think it should be done. If you do things differently or the plan deviates, that's okay. I will make as many changes behind the scenes as I need to make sure our athletes are progressing and are prepared for competition. I always say to my staff behind the scenes, listen, there's no point fighting them or kicking up dirt or whatever, because at the end of the day, that person is the one who has to go face the media, face the executive directors if you don't win. And, if they followed your plan and it didn't work out, great, you own that. But if they deviated from that plan, you can't turn around and say, well, that's not what I wanted. So, I'm glad that person's out or whatever. So I always tell them, I preface it by saying, listen, this is what I'd like to do. This is what I think we should do. If you want to do something different, hey, we'll support that. But there's a lot of other things I can do behind the scenes. So that's, we might need to ramp up recovery methods. We might need to tailor down our training if volume's sneaking up too high. We might, need to modify things for some players who aren't playing that much based off a balance or imbalance of roster. So I always, the picture I always have in my head is the duck on the water. And I've used this in some presentations I've given, right? You look at a duck on the water, everything's cool, everything's calm. That's how we should be in our support staff role to support the team. But under it, the legs are churning like crazy because we're doing everything we can to keep that machine running, whether or not they choose to follow kind of that path or those load progressions we've given. And, the hard part is, I've gotten into some of those dust ups with coaches and they never end well for anybody. If you can be as solid as you possibly can be with your core group. So for us at Hockey Canada, that's our doctor, our therapists, our mental performance consultant, that's kind of our behind the scenes group and from a medical model type situation. And if we can be tight and if we know that things are going to come up that are deviating from what we would like, we just have to strategize what can we do to put the athlete in the position so when they go back out they can succeed.
Yeah, and it brings up a lot of different things at that level where you have that performance staff behind the scenes, and you have buy-in both ways from the coaching staff to a certain degree of what it is you're doing, and you're all kind of in the same boat, garnering success based on wins, losses, gold medals, championships, these kinds of things. A little bit of a different scene when it comes to amateur sports. So I guess my question was a little bit jaded. I'm not trying to it's a good term, kick up dirt or stir the pot with coaches in amateur sport. But I think like the conversational piece at the amateur level, is there language or is there something you can point to sort of, maybe look at the amount of ice time, let's say for a 14-year-old AAA team, going hours and hours every day, and where they have limited access to some of the things that you touched on, performance in the gym, treatment, recovery, these kinds of things where coaches can maybe start to balance or see the balance. Is it just a matter of dialoguing with coaches, you think, at those levels, or just kind of it is what it is and we need to tinker behind the scenes?
Yeah, it is what it is. Like I'm a little bit of a defeatist in that method because especially with hockey, you can't challenge the machine that is churning along, especially here in Canada. We know it's wrong, parents know it's wrong, but nothing's going to change. So in my opinion, I'm not going to be the one throwing rocks at a tank. I'm going to try to do what I can to help those that are in the way of the tank. I still have conversations. So my oldest son turns 8 this week. I still have parents at their hockey, we are non-competitive. He is non-competitive.
Yeah, let me see if I can get Adam back.
It's not going to help him here or there or skate or whatnot. So it's just you can't fight the machine. But what I can do is try to educate them. And if coaches ask, and coach presentations that I do for amateur hockey, I always ask them. I'm like, do they really need to skate that much? Especially you can hand them all the LCAD research you want. Sport Canada does a great job with that. But you're still fighting that machine. And so, I want to be protective of those athletes that are swept up in it. I know I can help them instead of trying to pick that battle with the coach. You know what I'm trying to say? For me, learning to pick your battles, you're never going to win against the head coach, even if you're the most knowledgeable person in that frame of mind. But what can we do to help those athletes? And, maybe you're not doing that workout, you're going to do a recovery session, or you are going to do some sprint work because you notice they haven't done a lot of that, or, you just have to trade off within what you do. And, at the end of the day, again, this is kind of the defeatist part of me, but it's a realistic view, in my opinion. We're low on the totem pole they always make those org charts, right? That you'll have the general manager, then the head coach, we're way down here. So let's impact what we can down here.
Yeah, great advice, and not about causing ripples, but the things that you touch on is being as rock solid as you can with the team that you have in place behind the scenes, not to cause ripples, but to be on board with the coach and support the athletes that are there, which is massive.
Now,
Yeah.
I'll cut you off, James, because that just reminded me of something else. So
Yeah.
while we're, owning our area, the one thing I would say to counterbalance that is if the head coach's opinions start to creep into your sphere or frame of expertise, that's when you need to stand up. That's when you need to dig your toes in the sand a little bit and say, well, I'm the boss of this area. The line I always used to use at York, mainly in my head and behind the scenes, but I'd always say to coaches, you wouldn't like it if I came to your practice and told you how to start coaching basketball, volleyball, whatever, you name the sport. You can't just come down into the weight room and do that down here because you played whatever sport 10, 15 years ago and that's how you train. Like, I'm the expert here. You wouldn't like it if I went up to your court or your area and do it. And you put it that way, they get their back up a little bit, but it drives the point home to them pretty quickly that's like, this is my coaching area and this is my domain and I'm the expert here. And sure, we can talk philosophy and structure and everything, but as soon as you start influencing down here, that goes against the way I think things should be done or what we've agreed on previously, then you need to draw that line.
Yeah. And relationships are huge, and having that dialogue enough to be able to manage that back and forth. And York was good for that on a lot of levels, with certain teams and certain coaches, where they could ask what you were doing and you justify it and that's enough. That's all they needed. Or, they had some other coaches that were really active and engaged and would come down and be at workouts and see the dynamic and see what was happening. So that was a cool setting as well to sort of have all angles and a bunch of different personalities from coaching perspectives. And wins and losses matter, but they're not the be all and end all, maybe like they are in Hockey Canada. But let's backtrack a little bit. How did you first get into hockey? I know there's a lot of people on the call that are Canadian, if not majority that are Canadian, and probably are in hockey or know at least what hockey is or want to get into hockey. Was that a natural progression for you? I know you were an athlete, you played football at Queens in your undergrad and these kinds of things. Where did it start for you?
Well, it actually started. So I played hockey, but just like recreationally. Like I was, you play like rep hockey and that sort of thing, but it was never a super competitive drive for me. Right. But once I decided strength and conditioning was of interest, and this is early 2000s, it wasn't a big industry like it is now. I did an internship at what I would say is like a football factory down in the US in Florida. And, at that time, you basically had Athletes Performance, which is now Exos in Arizona. They only had the Arizona location at the time. Or you could kind of take some of these big like football factory type strength and conditioning places and they would take interns. And so I just wanted to see what it was like. So I did it from my third to fourth year of university. Back then, athletes really only played 4 years. So, going into my senior year. And I remember having a conversation at the end of the summer. They offered me a job. They said, do you want to come back and, we'll hire you once you've graduated and you can come down and work down here. And I was like, I don't know. Like Florida was nice, but I didn't know if I wanted to go work in that environment or that setting. And so I remember the internship coordinator at the time, she said, well, if you want to stay in Canada, that's great. You should really focus on hockey and kind of dig in there a little bit. So that's what I did. Once I graduated, I was kind of looking around and I started working I moved to Ottawa. So I'm from just outside Toronto. I grew up in Mississauga. I went to Queens and then moved to Ottawa after I graduated because I got hired at a private training facility that kind of specialized in hockey called the Athletic Conditioning Center, working under Lauren Goldenberg, who was one of the kind of first strength coaches in the NHL. And I just knew it would be a good opportunity. There weren't that many in Canada at that time. Like, they didn't, this gym structure of training just athletes, it didn't exist back in 2005 when I graduated. Right. So I started working there, and that's really when I got into hockey and learning and reading. And really, I was thinking about this when you sent me that outline today, James, and my whole career is, I would describe it really as being like opportunistic at kind of every step. Like the whole PhD thing, I had the opportunity with Hockey Canada, so I kind of jumped in on that. And I started working with Lauren and learning about the hockey stuff, and then met Randy Lee, the strength coach at the time with the Ottawa Senators. And one of my professors at Queen's, who wasn't even in the kinesiology and phys ed program at the time, he was a business prof, but I took his leadership class. And he did some mental skills stuff with the Sens. And unbeknownst to me, he had said to Randy, one of my students is moving up to Ottawa. He's like strength and conditioning. If you ever run into him, be nice to him and say hi to him. And I met Randy a few months being there, and he was like, John Phelan told me like I needed to meet you. So if you ever need anything, give me a call. And that started the relationship that ended up getting me hired by the Senators. But I just fell into hockey and started learning more about it, working with it, energy system needs, needs analysis of what the athletes need, that sort of thing. So it was really kind of that trigger from the internship coordinator, Jasmine, down in Florida, that said, well, if you want to stay in Canada, you should kind of learn about the sport that matters most up there.
Yeah, cool. What a deep insight, and just such a cool map to sort of follow. And I know a lot of people on here are navigating, what to do next or how to get to where they think they should be. And sometimes we see, like, Scott Livingston was on here, and I know you know Scott, and he always talks about the red Ferrari and chasing, like, trying to find that red Ferrari, and you're constantly chasing it down and all these kinds of things. But to remove that analogy and just see, like, we see you now at your resume and all the things that you've done, but to hear you, how you navigated it and kind of fell in. Timing is a big part of things, right? And so is relationships. Like those, so are relationships. Those two things combined, along with like this deep thirst for knowledge and development and constant growth. These seem to me to be like there's sort of immeasurable components, but they're also like, they're definitely necessary to achieve what you want to do, and I think sometimes we sit back on our laurels and wait for that perfect job to come around instead of, moving the chains and being the duck's legs underwater in our own careers sometimes, right? And just hearing your story and where you've gotten to and all the people you've spoken with and about and created for yourself has been a massive insight, I'm sure, for everybody on here. For me, always, I love listening to your stories. I love seeing your rings, your medals. Those are all gravy, but it's more about the depth of you as a person and your work ethic and diligence within, yourself, and checking yourself and what you want to do and how you're going to go about achieving it. I remember sitting in your office probably more hours of the day than I was in the clinic at times, just because such a progressive leader in the field, and how you worked with the athletes and the technology and programming and all that side of strength and conditioning really pushed me to do a lot more. And I think I mentioned it to you the other week, like I'm interning now, I'm 15 years into my professional career, but interning to me is like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to interact on a different way, to learn what's going on relevant to the university setting, the strength and conditioning side with your colleague, Steve Lidstone, and Vicky's there, obviously, at Brock, and what a cool program they have going there. But man, I just, all the relationships that you've built over the years, you guys also have I've lost complete track of time. The Hockey Summit is coming up, right? Not tonight, but like the High Performance Summit.
Yeah, so that's end of June.
Yeah.
I need to start working on that presentation. But okay, so like, I'm going to totally sidetrack you here, but you talk about Steve Lidstone. So, that's a funny story. So Steve's the reason I ended up at York, because so Steve and I met, 2008, 2007, 2008, I started working with a Hockey Canada athlete in Ottawa, one of the female athletes, Katie Weatherston. She was just finishing her national team career. I was working with her through the ACC or Athletic Conditioning Center where I was at. We were a national, one of those designated training centers. And so kind of Hockey Canada, she fortunately, talked well on my behalf, said she liked her trainer to the powers that be. And so they flew me out to Charlottetown for a little bit of like a hockey summit that they put on. And Steve was there. He had just gone from York to Mac. So kind of we hit it off. Like Steve and I have very complementary personalities. And so we hit it off. I left to go work with the Senators. And then when I only lasted a year with them, I was looking for a job, and Steve was like, well, the guy they hired at York after I left, he's leaving, kind of, I can put you in touch with the people there. And so that's ultimately how I ended up getting that job because, Steve vouched for me. He put me in touch with Cindy and Dan. And so I chatted with them and then ended up, getting that job there. But, that's another thing, like Steve and I met in 2008. We've been good friends now 12 plus years. It was great what, he's built at Mac and Brock, and then, what him and I were able to do with the OUA strength and conditioning in general. We were the old guards. Like, I think when I left, I was the longest tenured strength coach at an OUA school.
Right.
And to see the growth of that. But, again, opportunities, you never know where they're going to come. Steve and I hit things off in Charlottetown in 2008. I didn't know 2+ years later that would lead to a 9-year career at York.
Yeah, really, really cool, overlapping relationships and these kinds of things. And as we're talking about this, it brings up, while you were with the women's team, a couple of the athletes came that were fairly local to York and trained with you. And you brought Vicky up to see me one day because she had some lingering issues and some different body parts as she was getting ready for world championships and things like that. And now it's come full circle. She's now doing her PhD in osteo as well, and working as the lead strength and conditioning coach down there at Brock, and now I'm sitting in on her lecturing, which is amazing. These relationships that you never know where they're going to go. But I hadn't done a lot of work with hockey athletes specifically, but this is where Adam and I combined a lot of our time at York to do some needs analysis and also to have the strength world, so to speak, come up to the clinic, which is the physical situation at York. Is the clinic is upstairs, the high performance center is downstairs, and then for the clinic to come back down. And I think that was a big part of our time at York, of my time with you at York, was to sort of integrate those bodies as well. I know you had kickstarted having the athletic therapy students go down and have some hours, and then we kind of mandated it as things went along to have them spend some time to see what was going on down there. Because when you miss how athletes are moving in the gym, you miss a lot of information, and I think it's crucial to have good relationships with everybody. But S&C and AT tend to be paralleled pretty regularly in pro sport, at least, and in a university setting, maybe not parallel, that's the wrong term, but interacting quite often. Maybe you can just touch on your relationships with therapy staff, either Hockey Canada at York, how those dynamics worked best and what doesn't, maybe in your opinion, what didn't work well.
That, the relationship we had with the clinic when I was at York, I was really, really proud of. I think that was a gold star of our combined support staff program for our athletes. I talked to a lot of my colleagues at other OUA schools, and they didn't have that. And they were always like, well, how did you get that? And I'm like, well, we worked on it. When I first got there, it was basically Cindy, Tracy, and I. And that's something we worked on. We worked on revamping our ACL rehab together. We, popped up to the clinic. I tried to be in the clinic at least once a day. And I wasn't going to let the physical separation block any sort of combined work we could. I didn't want that there to be that silo, and I don't think they did either. Partly I probably forced myself on them a little bit, just to kind of work on that relationship. And like when I leave there, I popped into the clinic when I was on campus in November, and I felt just as home and just as welcome, as if I had never left. And I know, one of the things I always encouraged the other OUA schools to do was foster that relationship as best you can. And they are going to be champions in your corner for athletes. They're going to be champions in your corner for resources. I'm going to kind of tell you, at the end of the day, a lot of the money is going to go to more to the clinic because of athlete welfare than it will to strength and conditioning in the eyes of administration. So, I know Cindy really helped some budget stuff early on and would buy stuff and help us because we could show that there was going to be a need to help our athletes. At one point we were talking about co-purchasing force plates together and stuff like that towards the end of her and I's time there. And, just championing that relationship is huge. And, as some of the students on here go to other schools, and if there isn't that relationship, create that relationship. You might just be a student therapist at a school, but go hang out with the strength staff. They're good people, and get out of your comfort zone a little bit that way. But that's who you need to be building relationships with as well.
Yeah, 100%. And that relationship is one that I've always found to be crucial. In pro sport, coming out of school, it was right away for me. It was I obviously know sort of like the organizational flow chart, like you mentioned earlier, is to understand where information is coming from and going to. But the equipment staff and the strength and conditioning staff, and then therapy, all combined. In a contact sport like football or hockey, I think those three mesh really easily and really well, and you need to have good relationships back and forth there as well. Even in baseball, where equipment and all these kinds of things, like sometimes you got to talk about like detergent that's being used in the laundry or what's not coming out of uniforms and causing skin irritations or things like that. But relationships in sport, no matter where you're at, I think getting out of your comfort zone and speaking to all the people in the organization is massive. So even that's a tidbit to take home for sure.
Yeah, the thing for those of you on here that do want to get into pro sport or elite level sport, silos do exist. I talk to colleagues of mine, friends of mine in the National Hockey League, and they don't have great relationships with their equipment staff or therapy staff and FNC staff. And so that will be there. I will challenge you. You'll have a way better experience if you can break that down. I know a lot of you will probably get hired first as assistants, possibly, and then kind of work your way up. Don't fall into the trap of this is how we've always done it. And, you're an assistant therapist, you're going to do what I do. Yeah, but you could potentially be that bridge. And so try to create that bridge, try to break down those silos, because for me, at the end of the day, I always say, my job is to make the athlete better so the coach can get the best out of the athlete. And I know I can do my job better if I'm on the same board or same team or same level as those other people to help those athletes.
Yeah, and it comes down to having conversations as well. And you've mentioned already, rocking the boat is not the angle. Throwing rocks at a tank, not a good move. It's not going to do much, and it just doesn't seem like a healthy option. But creating that dialogue and creating relationships and breaking down those walls with sometimes really, really honest and necessary conversations to make it happen. Because, you and I spent a lot of time with certain teams in our time at York that overlapped, and then, things changed and things got a little out of whack in certain areas. And then we came back around to where are we going to have the most impact? What's going to be received well? Where are the hard conversations going to be had? But creating a little bit of a model in terms of a needs analysis that you were already doing, but also to blend into the therapy side where student therapists could get involved and then have that dialogue with the coaches so that they could understand better what was happening and what needed to happen that hadn't been happening in the past. So all of this stuff is very dynamic and lots of moving parts. Staying professional has always been your MO in my perspective anyway. It's been a big part of what you do, and not getting too far on one side or the other, but sort of staying narrow-minded. I always remember your credit card analogy as well with athletes, building rapport with athletes and trust with athletes. What advice would you give in terms of staying professional with athletes? How do you navigate that? So that they know they can come to you, they know that they can trust you, but they also know, that you're a professional and you're there for their betterment, and to serve, that full service of the team organization or wherever you're at.
Yeah, for me, as I get older, the age gap lengthens, so it's easier to have those clear limits. But certainly younger coaches and younger therapists, the mantra I always tell them is, you can be friendly, but you're not friends.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, there's going to come a time when I'm going to ask them to do something they're not going to want to do. Sometimes that might be every day I'm going to ask them to do something that they're not going to want to do. But if I'm their friend, it's easier for them to blend the, come on, let's not do this, let's go easier, let's do it. If I'm friendly, I can say, James, listen, I know you don't want to do this, but you have to. And I can put my foot in your butt and I can give you a boot to do it, or we can do it. So I always like to draw the clear line there. It's certainly harder when you're younger, when you're just starting out. And it's not easy, but if you have that line and you don't oversway it, I built great relationships even with that mantra. Like I see Emerson's on here. We had Emerson when he was a freshman all the way through, and then finally he's now the assistant coach there. There's Britt is a prime example as well. We had her as an athlete as well, and so you have these people come through that you're still friends with. When you're professional, you can go from that friendly to a friend, and but you have to have that line as an athlete, because at the end of the day, at some point it's inevitable I'm going to ask them to do something they don't want, and I want them to know that there's no sway, because at the end of the day I need them to do something they're going to not want to do.
Yeah. And you build that trust all the way along to know that when you ask them to do those things, okay, I'm in. Like at some point, sometimes it takes a little bit more of an arm wrestle than other days, but they know that it's in their best interest because you build that along the way.
The nice part about York and having that stable group of athletes was, and I would joke around with some of the younger athletes or freshmen. I'd say, hey, listen, I get it. You're not going to like me for your first 2 years, but look at the relationship and the rapport I have with your fourth and fifth year people, because they understand. They've been where you were. They were testing bounds, testing limits, seeing how far they could push me. I'm not swaying. You're not going to get me. But look at the relationship we have when you can you follow along. You're going to know at some point you're going to need me or want me, and that's when we can foster that. I'm proud of some of the relationships we had with some of those fourth and fifth year athletes, whether it's they get that injury in third year and you become their crutch, but then you get them back to their sport and spending time. And maybe it's just a time thing. And, I always made sure I had really friendly assistants, because, you need that people person there, that coach, that yin to your yang. And I was fortunate enough to have some great assistants during my time at York that I think we were a great 1-2 punch.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Really, really good stuff. And some of the, as you were mentioning that, I was just thinking of the litany of athletes that fell onto in terms of, first and second years, and then looking at the relationships. I've had the opportunity to have, Chris and Jamal on here as professional football players now. And kinds of things, like first and second year, those guys didn't want anything to do with me, but third and fourth year, as priming for certain things or dealing with certain injuries, you started with certainly professionalism and friendliness enough, but to know that when you put your foot down, it's down, and that's warranted. So really, really good stuff. Really, really good advice, man. You kind of surprised me when you said the NHL. We'll get into that another time. But when there's what did you say, 13 teams in the NHL are using Catapult right now? Yeah. So it's kind of surprising that there are 17, 18 other ones that aren't. So alternate technology or just not to this point. Kind of interesting. But I'm sure once your research gets out there and rumor spreads that is no longer rumor, it's factual. I'm sure there'll be more jumping on board with it as well. So really, really cool stuff. What are you doing outside of hockey and Catapult? You reading anything good? I'm reading a lot of Pete the Cat books right now, and
Harry Potter.
Yeah, are you into it?
So we read a chapter a day. So my sons are 8. Well, he turns 8 this week, and 5.5. And we started it right at the beginning of this quarantine, just as like, I don't know how we got the first book, but we bought it. Like I bought it like the first day, like before everything kind of locked down, and we started it, and the kids absolutely love it. So my house, like my son's birthday on Thursday, it's like Harry Potter everywhere. Like we've somehow now have all the Lego sets, and I had never read the books before. I had watched the movies like a long time ago, but this is my first time reading it. So we read a chapter a day. And that's taken up a lot of my reading right now with the kids, and it's great. I have to be careful of the language. So the problem is my kids have stayed the same age, but Harry's now like 4 years older. So it's not like when the books were released and the kids grew with Harry. So we're like having to scale it a bit. It's more concerning for the movies because they're certainly getting a lot darker as they go on, and my kids don't really understand that. But that's the big thing. That's what we're reading. Like professionally, like I don't read a ton. Well, I read a lot when I travel. Obviously, I'm not traveling right now, so I've got like 3 or 4 partially started books for when I'm on airplanes and in airports. But because I'm not traveling as much, I just haven't picked them up. Like I spend so much time reading and stuff for work that I just need to check off when I'm not doing it. I'm a chronic book starter, but not finisher.
Pick one up, pick another one up, start it, get something out of it, get something out of another one, pick one up in the middle, read it, whatever. I'm with you, man, 100%. Coming into this 2 weeks of isolation or self-quarantine or voluntold quarantine coming back, I ordered a whole bunch of books, and I don't know, man, we're driving with a carload of stuff that's going to take 2 weeks to unpack. Those books I might get the covers bent on them, and that's about it. But it always awesome to get something outside of work as well, and with kids, I think it makes it kind of awesome too. You get to do the voices and kind of like navigate where their learning is at, and what a cool journey to be on at home from that side of things too. So awesome, man. I'll let anybody, if you have any questions for Adam in terms of his where he's at, his research, where he's going next, any of those things, please feel free to do so. I'm not going to keep you guys too long. For my own sake and for Adam's as well. There's probably some Harry Potter or something that needs to be read or check out of these Zoom meetings, because I don't want to be part of that Zoom fatigue. Just don't.
My wife and I actually need to start the 4th movie, but she's going to be asleep by 9:30, so most likely I'll be watching the movie by myself.
And I don't want any part of that Zoom fatigue stuff.
No, it's all good. This is the start of a new week. It's fresh, so you're catching me after I checked out yesterday.
That's right. And you got out golfing today, right? Instagram. And then you mentioned that. I saw that you were out golfing with, is the masks a thing? You had to wear the mask?
No. He was just being silly.
Okay. We're in certain places. Like we've driven from Florida all the way up to Pennsylvania, and it's amazing to see the difference, right? Like in some of the southern states, it's just like, well, what's a mask? Why do I need to wear that? And then you look at the numbers, and you're like, holy Hannah, like what's going on? And then up here, to come check into the hotel and like to walk down the hallways, you have to have one on. So we have like a nice Bahama pineapple mask and these kinds of things. So really interesting, and I'm sure you're getting lots of questions in terms of what things are going to look like for Hockey Canada and how things are going to go. We're not going to go down that road. I just heard tonight on the radio that the NHL is starting again sometime. They have a plan, and they're going to test every single athlete every single night. That is some kind of thing. So hey, new reality is what it is, and adjustments need to be made. So it'll be cool. If nothing else, a cool, not cool in that sense, but an interesting experiment in sport and how things are going to look and feel moving forward.
Well, one of the cool things I'm actually working on with work is we're working on this thing called the proximity project. So can you use the monitors to count the number of interactions during the field of play from when they come inside the 2-meter bubble, but also time duration. So I can count that I went, I had 13 interactions within 2 meters with James and 11 with Britt, but what's my total incident time?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I'm tackling, to seeing what happens in the typical hockey game or practice. Like, what do those incidents look like? So that's a really cool thing. We're using our technology to fit what's happening now, because from a contact tracing perspective, that might be valuable. We don't know, but that might be something that might be valuable.
Yeah, and obviously not precluded. Like, this was not, now you can go back and look at it, right? The throw the web out there, and sometimes you catch a big fish. If not, you're gathering some pretty cool information that can be applied to any number of studies in terms of contact and area and spatial awareness and some other things. So cool stuff, man. Amazing. A question just came in here to me, so I don't think anybody else can see it, but between male and female hockey players, what are some common strength deficits that you've noticed over your years, if any? Were there any trends or similarities and differences?
For me, females are chronically under strengthened. So one of the things we've really tried to do, and one of our common proponents for our younger female athletes with Hockey Canada, so our under 18, is don't be scared of strength. We want our female athletes to understand that being strong is extremely valuable from performance and health perspective. Yeah. And that flies in the face of a lot of the fitness / Instagram exposures they would have. Fortunately for us, most of our best players on the senior women's team are strong, and it's a byproduct of their strength, that they can do a lot of that. But we really try to talk to them about being strong and the value of strength, and how can you do that? Well, would you rather be hit by a hammer or a wet paper bag? I'd rather be hit by, I'd rather do the hitting as the hammer than as the wet paper bag. And having the opportunity to get strong as a young athlete is valuable. And you can talk about it from an injury prevention perspective, a performance perspective. But they're really, that's the biggest thing. Like, I don't have to tell, we'll use athletes you brought up, like Jamal and Chris. I don't have to tell them you need to get stronger. Like, they know that's valuable for their sport. They're already strong. We can get them stronger. But trying to, even like, I know the question was around Hockey Canada, but we can just say any sport athlete. Take those young female athletes and try to tell them that they need to get stronger and the value for it. They just want to jump higher. Well, then that's what you sell them on. And if we can get them stronger on that, it'll help their arm care. It'll help their potential ACL incidence rate. Like, so for me, it's strength. Like, bar none, I want my female athletes to get as strong as possible. Yeah. That's how I would answer that question.
Yeah. Yeah. Great answer.
If they want to ask, if they want to elaborate on it, by all means. But chasing strength in female athletes, I think, is so important.
Yeah, 100%. And there's been a nice turn in that as well. Like, even in your time with Hockey Canada, right? And from when you started, there's a nice shift in female athletes to really embrace that, right? Like, much more than before.
Way more.
Yeah, way more. And the buy-in is great. And I think that goes any number of ways. You touched on, performance or enhancing, mechanics or biomechanics or injury prevention or injury deterrence. There's so many ways that you can look at strength and highlight its value to get buy-in, right?
Yeah, and that's, like, for those of you that were with me when I was at York, that's one of the reasons why I went to a simple percentage-based periodization model for our teams. Was athletes couldn't hide a progressive overload if they were being held accountable to their main lifts from a percentage-based model. And people can argue percentage-based or linear or undulating periodization, whatever. For me, it provided mainly are female athletes who, don't understand progressive overload and lifting and the, opportunity cost of lifting heavier weights and that sort of thing. They didn't have to think anymore. They could just follow the numbers. And I knew at some point we were going to get them into their percentages of strength gain.
Yeah, experience in the field, right? And adapting to the environment and working, sometimes it takes a little bit of a step back and looking at some of the, some of the nomenclature, the knowledge that's out there, and really just kind of making it applicable to who you're working with. Another question coming in here: do you feel the coaching power imbalance is detrimental? And do you have examples of athletes expressing concerns but too afraid to throw a stone against the tank?
Oh, for sure. Is it detrimental? 100%. It comes back to service. The coach, like us in our role as support staff, are there to serve the athletes. The coaches are there to serve the institution or the team that they're a part of, really. And is it detrimental? 100%. I think the opportunities that you can have to foster the relationship, so that the coach who's ultimately driving the tank starts to move out of the way of the people they're running over, or vice versa, then you have some real wins. And we did that. Like, I remember, James, weeks ago when Dan was on here.
Yeah.
Dan was one of those, like, I used Catapult units with his group because I had them from my time with Hockey Canada. We changed a lot of the way he structured his practice week. And, Dan's somebody that would listen. Why? He has a growth mindset. He wants to do whatever he can to make his team better. There was other coaches at York, and we're not going to talk specifics, but who could have cared less about what we said from a perspective of modeling or performance or changing things. And, you're just not going to get it. And obviously those relationships suffered. In my opinion, the performance model that they ran suffered because they had that fixed, limited mindset. There's a part two to that question. Okay. Any examples of athletes expressing concerns? For sure. One of the things that I tried to do is I tried to have a safe space down in the gym. And one of the things I wanted to, and we never got around to it, but I would have loved to have had a couch in my office for people to come and hang out. And we had chairs, and I always had an open door policy. And, the hard part is I can't be someone who breaks down the structure of the team. So I'd always be like, okay, like, what do you want to do about it? We can sit here and talk about it. That's great. And then when we leave this room, we don't do it. I can go with you to the coach. I can try to have those conversations. We can express that. But at the end of the day, I always, as I've said earlier, try to do what's best for the athlete. So if they want to come talk to me about that, we'll try to do. So, there were times at York, James, you and I would try to set the athletes up for success, even within the crumbling structure that, they were working under. And that's not a bad talking anybody, but, we tried to do what we could for those athletes, whether it's giving them information to have those conversations with the coach about why they were doing certain things, or supplementing what we knew they needed from a therapy performance perspective type thing. So, for me, we circle back to relationships, and I feel like so many things get talked about for relationships, but, we always tried to just set them up for success as best we can, even if you're going against the draconian structure that some people run.
Yeah, huge feedback, and every sport's a little different. Every coach is a little different. It was amazing to have Dan on here, and I had a number of people who have watched, who were there for that conversation, who knew Dan or didn't know Dan, who have watched that session since, and have just said, how do we get more coaches like him? And it's not easy to find coaches like him that are going to be open, but once you see the value of that growth mindset and having that in all or as many aspects of the support staff or the whole staff, it really goes a long way in making the athlete centric model a whole lot more appetizing. Yeah. So, Emerson, I don't think you can see these ones now, but
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I'll read it out just for the formality of it. In switching from York to Catapult full-time, what have you enjoyed the most, and what do you miss? I think you've talked about some of the relationships and stuff and the regular drop-ins and those kinds of things. I know I miss that with you as a professional and a colleague, and definitely the athletes too, you know, the ones that pop in just to say hi or whatever, but I'll let you take that one and run with it. What's been good, what hasn't, and what are the differences?
Yeah, in all honesty, like one of the things that I thought I would miss the most, and I ended up not, it didn't have as big of an impact, was the daily coaching environment. I thought I was going to miss it a lot more than I do now, probably because I still do some coaching with Hockey Canada. So I still have that part. It's not like it was cut cold turkey. I really liked the pivot shift from what I was doing. You know, I'd been there 9 years. It was time for a change. And so it's not like I went from York to Guelph, right? It's not like I just went from one place. Like this was a whole pivot, like, you know, into this sports science side of things and research and all that. And so I just, it's been great. Like just mentally it's changed, you know, 9 years in one spot in a cyclical environment like York, where every year you churn new athletes and those other athletes move up. Like by the end of it, like our program was very well structured, because I believe in running structure, that, you know, we had it down. Like we knew what athletes were coming in and what teams were coming in weekly and daily and everything. And so it's just been a nice change, like mentally. You know, I do miss the camaraderie of the gym a lot, whether that's athletes, coaches, strength coaches. You know, like I really miss, I had an assistant, like I got Dale in 2010, 2011 or sometime around there. So
Yeah.
I was working closely with someone for 9 years, not 7 or 8 years, like during my time there. Then all of a sudden now it's just me. So I really miss that, that mentoring, that collaboration, that co-coaching that we had there. That was a big change. You know, I still talk to all of those people anyway, but just to have them in that daily environment, that's a big miss for me. You know, one of the things I would say is don't be scared to pivot. You know, you're still using your expertise and you're still doing that, but like, don't be scared to pivot to something else, and kind of the fear of the unknown. That would be a big thing. And, you know, it had been so much of what I had done that, you know, you just get the feeling that the time is right, or an opportunity presents itself. Don't be scared to say no.
Yeah, great advice, I think, in any aspect, you know, trying something new, learning something new, pivoting, yeah, shifting, changing direction when there's a fork in the road and you think like only one way is going to work out. Typically when you're following your pursuits, your passions, your learning, your continual growth, you'll find the thing that resonates the most, and you'll make it work, and then you make it into an opportunity, you make it into something great. And Adam is case in point. Catapult's been great for you. It's been great for your family. I know you love being at home too, and doing these things. So this time in COVID isn't drastically different for you, other than you have your kids home with you. So as soon as you get done a Zoom call, you're still dad, but you can't check out. That's been sort of a redundant theme with everybody's on here. So you get done with work and you're still at home, and then you got to play tag or read Harry Potter or be the wizard, or I don't even know the Harry Potter characters, but that part's been a little bit difficult.
Well, yeah. Like for me, when I was at York, I was having 75, 90-minute commutes on the regular one way. And that was a big change for me when I first started working from home. Was when my day ended, I just walked downstairs.
Yeah.
I wasn't getting in a car. And so I was gaining almost 3 hours back in my day. And so to use that time valuable with the kids was awesome to get back. And, you know, the knock on therapy or strength and conditioning are the long hours, the long days, the sacrifices your family makes. It's all there. I just have a better work-life balance now, because I can walk down the stairs, or, you know, I walk my kids to work every morning. I'm not getting up at 6 to drive 3 different 400 series highways to get to York anymore on time to train in the morning. I walk my kids to school, and then I have the opportunity to work from there. So that was a huge positive benefit of doing it.
Yeah, amazing, man. And as life shifts, you shift, and you keep growing, and you keep changing, and you keep adapting. And I think that's your role as a human being, but as a performance coach. And a lot of great lessons on here. I'm gonna let you go because I don't want to lose you based on battery life or something on this phone. This has been an awesome talk. I'm gonna go back and watch this one. I know a lot of people are. Really appreciate you taking the time, Adam. This is a big one for us to start off Athletic Therapy Month tomorrow as well. So I know the integration and hearing you speak as somebody who's at the top of the game globally from a performance standpoint is massive for everybody. And a whole bunch of thank yous coming in here. For everybody who made it out here this evening, really appreciate you as well being here. This is session 18 already, and things are just continually moving. We hope to be back in Ontario. Adam, I hope to have a coffee or something like that in the future once at least 2 weeks of isolation are over and things sort of return to mask operating or whatever we're doing in the future. And we have Dr. Zarnett will be on here Wednesday. I hope I gotta get better on my emails and get him on. That's our next guest on Wednesday. So not to downplay this one. It's been great. It's been a great chat. I look forward to chatting some more, Adam. Your insight is always valuable. Your professionalism, your friendship, your mentorship, and being able to call you all those things. So I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And it's great to see lots of familiar faces and names out there. So great job, everybody. Keep up the good work. I loved working with all of you back in the day, and hope you guys are moving onward and upward.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Everybody else, thank you for being here this evening, and tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your dad, and tell your uncles and whoever else. Let's keep this thing growing. It's Athletic Therapy Month starting tomorrow, so let's grow a little bit more awareness, have lots of good discussions, keep learning, keep loving, keep living, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday night. Good night.
Okay, thanks guys. Have a good one.
Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult@firststartherapy.com. CONSULT@firststartherapy.com. On Instagram @firststar.therapy, and our podcast host @letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.